The wind cut across the high desert like a blade, carrying dust and the smell of sage. When Eli Carter reined his horse to a stop, he felt the old restlessness rise in his chest. The kind that came from years of riding alone and believing that solitude was strength. He had grown up hearing stories about the Apache lands to the south, about borders drawn by fear and rumor. He told himself he knew better, that he wasn't like the men who spoke with hate, but believing you are different and acting differently are not always the same thing. Eli had ridden farther than usual that morning, following a dry wash until it curved toward a stand of cottonwoods. That was where he saw her. She stood at the edge of the trees, wrapped in a faded shawl, watching him with eyes steady as stone. Her name, he would later learn, was Nayland. In that moment he only knew she was Apache, and that knowledge stirred something reckless inside him, a mix of curiosity, pride, and the false courage that comes from thinking the world belongs to you. He dismounted without asking permission, letting his horse drink from the narrow stream. "Didn't expect anyone out here," he said, his voice casual, almost teasing. Nayland didn't answer. She turned to leave, but Eli took a step closer, raising his hand to stop her, not touching, but close enough to make the air feel tight. Words spilled out of him, careless and sharp, questioning what she was doing on his side of the land. He laughed once, as if it were all a harmless misunderstanding. Nayland stopped and faced him fully then. Her voice was calm, but it carried weight. She told him the cottonwoods had been her people's long before fences and claims. She told him he had no right to speak to her that way. For a moment, Eli felt the sting of shame, but pride pushed it down. He answered with more words to many, to loud, crossing a line not with his hands, but with his arrogance.
Oh.
When Nayland turned away again, her shoulders were stiff, and the silence she left behind was heavier than any insult. That evening, the sky burned red as the sun fell, and Eli rode home unsettled. He told himself it was nothing, that he hadn't meant harm, but sleep wouldn't come. He kept seeing the way Nayland's eyes had hardened, the way the air itself seemed to recoil. At dawn, hoofbeats thundered across the plain. They came like a moving horizon, 200 Apache warriors riding in disciplined lines, their presence undeniable. Dust rose behind them, and the ground seemed to tremble with each step. Eli stood frozen in his yard, his rifle leaning uselessly against the porch. He knew with a certainty that hollowed him out that this was because of him. The warriors stopped at the edge of his land. An elder rode forward, his hair silver, his face lined with years and wisdom. He raised a hand, and the world seemed to hold its breath. "You spoke where you should have listened," the elder said. "You claimed what was not yours. We are here for respect, not blood." Eli swallowed hard. His neighbors gathered at a distance, fear written across their faces, but no one spoke. Eli stepped forward alone. His voice shook as he admitted his wrong, defending himself, not minimizing it. He spoke Nayland's name, saying it aloud as if that alone could begin to mend what he had torn. He said he was sorry, not as a word to end trouble, but as a truth he finally understood. The elder listened without interruption. After a long moment, he nodded once. Nayland rode forward then, her expression unreadable. She looked at Eli, really looked at him, and spoke of dignity, of how easily harm can be done with words, of how strength is measured by restraint. "An apology is a beginning," she said, "but beginnings require work." The warriors did not stay. They turned as one and rode away, leaving behind a silence filled with possibility and obligation. Eli stood there long after they were gone, knowing that fear had spared him nothing and humility had shown him everything. In the weeks that followed, Eli changed. He rode less and listened more. He learned the true boundaries of the land, the stories written into stone and river. When he crossed paths with Apache families, he greeted them with respect, sometimes helping, sometimes simply stepping aside. It wasn't redemption he sought, but understanding. Months later, under the same cottonwoods, Eli and Nayland met again. This time, he waited. He spoke only when invited. The air was lighter, the stream clearer. They talked not as symbols of old conflicts, but as people sharing a fragile peace. The desert remained vast and unforgiving. But Eli no longer mistook it for emptiness. He had gone too far once and learned that courage isn't found in crossing lines, but in honoring them. And that lesson, earned in fear and humility, became the truest inheritance of his life.